There are scientific heroes all across the world fighting for science and humanity and health, and they are largely unsung and no one really knows about them. One of them I'm going to mention today for the first time. Never really mentioned this, but they did something in the past few weeks that indicates they are ready to step forward and fight for science in the context of the most unusual pattern we'd seen in the pandemic about strange clots. Now, I don't know if you are listening to this for the first time or if you've been following along because I regularly talk about unusual embalmers clots. These had been dismissed since 2021. And if you'd heard about a documentary called Died Suddenly, it was making reference to unusual clots embalmers were seeing. It was largely put as an anti vaccine campaign and it was ignored. The problem is that the clots didn't disappear and we didn't have a clear explanation for one, was it real? Two, if it was real, was it transient? We are now about 5 years down the line, and the clots, as far as I know, are still happening. What has changed in the past few weeks is that the scientists are starting to step forward and do the thing that makes it very difficult for this to be ignored. Here we have preprints.org. So this paper has been published in the preprint. It hasn't yet been accepted by the journal. It's not yet peer reviewed, but morphological and histological characterizations of anomalous intravascular casts. This is the description AICs for embalmers clots. Bruce Rafley, Matt Sheldon. This was published on the 26th of January 2026. It's the first time, in a sense, that somebody has taken these clots and put it directly in front of the scientific community. Now, this is going to be challenging for any journal to publish because it looks like some kind of conspiracy theory. Okay? But the link is in the description for the paper. But what you must understand is that either there is some very strange hoax going on, or these are actually real clots. Now, in the paper, they've taken the time to put in some images, and this is what they look like. Beginning in early 2021, licensed embalmers and clinicians in several countries reported recurrent removal of coherent, white, rubbery elastic intravascular casts during routine post-mortem care. So this was there for some time, and this is what they look like. Different types, different sizes. These are all in formalin. And what was unusual about them is the white appearance, because normally blood clots usually look like grape jelly. They're red with red blood cells in them. Not only are they white, but they are very difficult to break down. You literally can cut through them with a knife. What was interesting was as well that they found them not just in the bloodstream, but this is from somebody who had a drain, chest drain, I think, and axillary drain. And you can see the formation of these clots as well within the tubing. So this is something that is very unusual. We've not seen this before in this kind of way, and it is definitely tied to the post-pandemic period. We can't necessarily say what the cause is, but as you can imagine, there are two major things that will come up as a possibility. And it may explain why this has not been investigated far more thoroughly than it should have been. You have to understand that this journey for me has been fascinating with regards to these clots. As I mentioned, Tom Haviland had brought it to my attention with his survey, which he had done in 2023. But in 2024, when one of the researchers had reached out to me anonymously and quietly and shared what they were doing, and they were literally doing the studies quietly, using labs across the world to try and help them to get an understanding as to what exactly was in it. These are the heroes that are there quietly in the background doing the work nobody knows. And it's important to remember them because they take great risk in terms of their professional careers to even contemplate this. Because as I said, this kind of paper, we don't know if a journal will feel brave enough to publish it because they're going to get a lot of pushback. But it takes a lot of work to be able to get this to be done. I want to share with you a short clip. So what I did is, at the time when I had the conversation, I recorded the full thing because I thought to myself, this was so important that I didn't want this information to be lost. It was almost, I'm trying to think at the time, when I had the conversations about this, I tried to keep it completely quiet because the implications for these scientists, they were concerned about what would happen if this was known in the wider scientific community. That is how seriously it was taken at the time. Here is a short clip of the recording that I did at the time. At some point in the future, maybe I will share the full thing. I will check whether or not I can have the permission to share the full thing, but I thought I would share at least a clip to let you understand what we were talking about at the time that was so very important.
That natural system, you've just created a time bomb. Now, this vaccine is a cluster bomb, okay? So that's a weapon that is deployed that has many pieces that come out from it. And you can number these off. So get rid of the immune system, upset the natural flora, cause anaphylaxis. You can just make a whole list of these things. So it's a cluster bomb. And that's very clever because each of these different forms of death that it will cause are not related to COVID. Oh, the person died of a nasty bacterial infection. That's terrible. Next patient, please. So this cluster bomb is a stealth weapon. It has multiple actions because it derails all of your natural systems. Now, at some point in the future,
I'll pause that here, and you can understand. You have to remember that this conversation was happening 2 years ago. This was right at the tip of understanding what in the world was going on. I tell you what, some of the things that he said there, they sent chills up my spine at the time. What is really interesting is that the research coming out now is confirming what he was intonating at 2 years ago. When I talk about CD147 and the ability of the virus to get inside immune cells and destroy lymphocytes, natural killer cells, B cells. Just today, I came across another paper, which I'm still getting my head around. I think that just to give you an idea as to what I'm talking about, this other paper here is looking at B cell receptors. Now, this one has been published. I'll show you just the title and give you the idea as to what it's talking about to show you why this is such a serious thing. In this one, this was just published, B cell receptor function in virus entry. Anti-SARS-CoV-2 B cell receptors can mediate viral entry in an ACE2 independent mechanism. Essentially, what they're finding here, and this study was in the US, and it was only published, accepted and published the 6th of February 2026. And essentially what they're finding is that B cells, these are plasma cells that produce antibodies. The B cells that produce spike protein antibodies seem to be able to be targeted by the virus and, in theory, destroyed. Now, this is not in vitro, meaning that this is not in a live person. They did this in a lab and they saw this pattern. But what it means is that the virus could selectively be able to target the same immune cells that are producing antibodies to target it. This is at a level that I don't think we have ever seen. You have to remember, it's not one capability. We're talking about capability after capability. It's like a nuclear bomb that has an atomic thing and a laser guided. It's just unprecedented, the things that this virus can do. And I haven't really discussed a lot. I haven't had any discussions actually with regards to the recent release of files related to Epstein and so on. I haven't got into it at all, but I did notice the discussions about pandemics. It could be purely coincidental. But what I am saying is that we are dealing with a virus that is beyond anything we have ever seen before. I'm actually starting to think that this virus has capabilities even beyond HIV because it's airborne. But it can do similar things. It can infect similar cells. And so what we may be facing, and you have to think about this a minute, it is able to systematically dismantle the immune system step by step. If you leave it for years, just as what happened in the 80s with HIV, you then get AIDS, which is then you have a problem where there literally is such poor immunity that people get prone to multiple other things. But we are dealing with something at a level of sophistication that is potentially beyond that. And as he mentioned, the cluster bomb of impacts occur down the line. Actually, it just reminds me of something. Second World War, a 90-year-old told me this story. And she told me about butterfly bombs. And I thought, I'd never heard about that. And what she said is that in their area, they were close to the border, so in the East Yorkshire region. And she said that what the Germans had done at the time is that they dropped butterfly bombs. So they were bombs that looked like butterflies, and children would pick them up and play with them. But they had a delayed detonation on them. And the aim was that the children would play with them and then carry them inside the house, at which point they would then explode. It was frighteningly morbid in terms of its targeting. But the point was that it did an impact at a distance from when it was dropped. And in the same way, what he was talking about is that some of these mechanisms you don't see immediately. You will see it down the line. And if people are not continually looking for the links, people will perceive that it is a completely different thing that is happening, not related. And so this is what we're up against. And I just want to remind you, just so that you don't forget, should have said this earlier, but coming up in another few weeks is that I'll be tackling the clots and the mechanism of these clots in my own presentation. And the link is in the description. And the reason was because whilst I was doing some research in the past few weeks, I came across a mechanism that explains some very critical pieces of the puzzle with regards to why these clots didn't have red blood cells in them, why they were white, why they had so much hemoglobin, where they're located. So I'll be giving my own thoughts on that in that presentation. If you want to join me, I'll be able to be far more direct in terms of some of the points. Now, as I said many years ago, I didn't know if these clots were going to be a rabbit hole, meaning that you just don't know, could this be some strange thing that somebody else came up with? You can't be certain. But what I realized is that in science, you must be willing to look at things that don't appear to make sense initially. This is how breakthroughs happen generally. You look at observations, you look at patterns, and you try to make sense of them. Not all of them will make sense. Here are some of the pictures here. This is an example of the pale yellow current jelly normal kind of clots that you would get. And so this is again from their paper. This is an example of some of the samples I think that they took, raw samples from a single donor. All of these clots were then flushed out of their system by the embalmers. And you have to note that if these people were not having embalming done, we would not be aware of these clots. It's only because in terms of embalming, you have to literally flush out all of the blood and replace it with embalming fluid. And in the process of doing that, this is where they came across these unusual clots. As I said, history is going to come back to this and say, how did the scientific community not investigate this? I mean, there is just no logical reason, no matter what your thought is. It doesn't matter if you disagree. If you're seeing patterns that really don't make sense, you have got to look at it, at least study it, see what they're made of, come up with an idea as to the mechanism as to why they are formed, connect it to whatever else. But they ignored this. And I think they thought it would go away. I think that they thought, come on, this can't last for too long. Whatever the cause is, it's not going to go on forever. Based on the mechanisms I'm going to be talking about soon, this is not going to go away because immune response. And this is why we end up with strange things like this. This is another sample that they received, 10% buffered formalin. And you can see what it looks like here. The reason this is so important, it's the first time that it has been put in a very clear scientific approach that you can put in front of a scientist and say, listen, it hasn't yet been peer reviewed, but this is what they're seeing. Explain why this should not be investigated. This step is huge in terms of what they have done. And I really appreciate them for doing that. There are other people who are working in the background. I hope to talk to them in due course. But the truth be told, as time goes on, the answers will be found. May take a while, but they will come. And the worry is, when they do come, will there be anything we can do to mitigate the impact? Thank you for watching. And remember, look out for this presentation coming up in another few weeks. I'll try and explain as much of the science based from my research as I can. And hopefully, let's see if we can get some answers.